My family kicked me and my 7-year-old daughter out during Christmas dinner in a quiet suburb in Illinois, and the words still echo in my head like something unreal. "You should leave and never come back," my sister Jessica said, smiling like she had practiced it, while my mom Linda added softly that Christmas was better without me, and I didn't beg, I didn't argue, I just said, "Then you won't mind me doing this," because something inside me had finally broken. I was still sitting there with gravy on my plate and a fork in my hand, while my daughter Emily quietly counted peas on her plate, already understanding tension better than a child should, while Jessica's kids laughed loudly without being corrected, and across from me Jessica wore that calm smile, her husband Mark nodding along like he always did, my dad Robert staring down at his food like silence was easier than truth, and my mom acting like this was some normal dinner instead of a slow emotional collapse, and the whole evening had been full of small digs, comments about how tired I looked, how simple Emily's dress was, questions about whether I was still struggling financially. And I had smiled through it all like I always did because it was Christmas and because my daughter was watching, but then Jessica finally said it clearly, that they had all decided I should leave and never come back, and when I looked at my dad hoping for even one word, he said nothing, and something inside my chest cracked quietly. I told Emily to get her coat, and she obeyed too quickly, like she had been waiting for this moment, and that realization hurt more than anything, and as soon as she left the room, they relaxed like the problem had been solved, but instead of begging, I smiled, walked into the kitchen, and pulled out 3 envelopes I had hidden earlier, each one labeled with their names, Linda, Robert, Jessica, because I had come there planning to change their lives, planning to help them, but in that moment I realized they didn't deserve it. And without saying much I tore each one slowly, the sound of paper ripping cutting through the room, and their expressions shifted from smug to confused to panicked as they realized those papers weren't just cards, they were something important, something they had just lost, but I didn't explain, I didn't argue, I just walked out, took Emily's hand, and left, and as we stepped outside into the cold, I glanced back and saw them trying to piece the torn papers together, their faces turning pale. And seconds later the door flew open and they ran after me, calling my name, begging me to come back, to undo it, to fix it, but 5 minutes earlier they had told me I didn't belong, and now suddenly they couldn't let me go, and I drove away without stopping. My sister Jessica had always been the golden child growing up, the one who got everything while I learned to stay quiet, to not complain, to make myself smaller, and even as an adult that dynamic never changed, and when I married my husband Daniel, he was the first person who ever told me that the way my family treated me wasn't normal, and for years we quietly supported my parents financially, sending money every month without ever mentioning it, while Jessica took credit for things she never did, and then 6 months ago everything changed when Daniel died in a workplace accident that should never have happened, and suddenly I was alone, grieving, raising Emily by myself, barely holding everything together, so the money we had been sending stopped. Not out of anger but because I simply couldn't afford it anymore, and my family noticed the missing money faster than they noticed my grief, and when I finally asked for help once, they gave a small amount and then posted about it publicly like they had saved me, humiliating me in front of everyone. And I stayed quiet, I didn't expose them, I didn't defend myself, and at the same time I kept one secret. The compensation from Daniel's case, which took months to process but eventually came through as a life-changing amount, and my first instinct, even after everything, was still to help my family, to fix things, to finally earn their respect, so I prepared those envelopes as Christmas gifts, each one containing enough to change their lives, but they never even gave me the chance, because to them I was still the same struggling person they had always looked down on, and after I left, I stayed in a hotel that night with Emily, and she quietly asked me if her grandmother didn't like her, and that question hurt deeper than anything else, because no child should ever feel unwanted by their own family, and in that moment I realized this wasn't just about me anymore, it was about protecting her, and in the days that followed, my sister tried to twist the story online, painting me as ungrateful and selfish, but for the first time in my life, I told the truth, I showed the years of support I had given, and everything changed. People saw what really happened, and suddenly my family's story didn't hold up anymore, and they came to my door days later pretending to make peace, bringing fake apologies and excuses, but it was clear they weren't there for me, they were there for what I had, and for the first time, I said no. I closed the door, and I chose my daughter over their approval, and months later, with distance and clarity, I realized I didn't lose anything that night. I walked away from something that had been breaking me for years, and instead I built a life where my daughter feels safe, valued, and loved, because sometimes the hardest decision isn't leaving, it's finally accepting that some people were never going to treat you right no matter how much you gave them. Moral lesson. Because sometimes the hardest decision isn't leaving, it's finally accepting that some people were never going to treat you right no matter how much you gave them. And this is where the real lesson begins. In Islam, family is extremely important, parents have a high status, and children are taught to respect, care, and serve them with kindness. But at the same time, Islam also teaches justice. Parents are not allowed to oppression, favoritism, or emotional harm between children. The Prophet, peace be upon him, clearly discouraged unfair treatment among siblings and taught that every child deserves equal love, respect, and dignity. What happened in this story wasn't just harsh, it was injustice. A mother who humiliates one child while favoring another, a father who stays silent in the face of wrong, and a family that values money over relationships. This goes against the spirit of Islam. Respect for parents does not mean accepting abuse silently. Sabr, patience, does not mean destroying your self-respect or exposing your child to harm. Sometimes, protecting your child and setting boundaries is also part of your responsibility as a parent, and that too is an amanah, trust, from Allah. If a home becomes a place of humiliation instead of mercy, then distance can be a form of protection, not disobedience. At the same time, we are reminded not to completely leave the door of basic respect open, but do not allow repeated harm. Parents must remember, Allah will ask how you treated each child. Did you show fairness, or did you break one heart while elevating another? Children must remember, honoring parents is important, but Allah does not allow injustice, even within family. Now think for a moment. If you were in her place, would you stay silent for the sake of family, or protect your child and your dignity? And if you were the parent, would you choose ego, or justice, before it's too late?